With ongoing concerns over player welfare and the wider football calendar, 3 Nations League games going to extra time was just what we needed. This is the ArsenalVision post-match podcast, and those of you with a sharp attention to detail will have realised that something is different, and you'd be absolutely right to believe that, because I am not Elliot Smith, nor should you block me on social media, hopefully. My name is Phil Costa, and I'll be in the hosting chair for this international duty special of the podcast, while Elliot is somewhere in the Caribbean catching some well-earned rays and more than a few margaritas, if those live show after parties are anything to go by. Speaking of margaritas, I do have a guest with me today who also knows his way around a beverage, although with his dulcet tones, they are probably more suited to a Manhattan or a crisp glass of Cabernet, and his name is Clive Palmer. Hello, Clive.
Hello. I mean, margarita is only new to my life, actually. Andrew introduced them to me probably about a year or so ago, and since then, been a bit life-changing.
These podcast hosts, they're bad news. Don't get on a night out with them, because you'll end up, I think, with a sore head the next morning. Have you been watching any Nations League, or have you taken this time to lock into some non-league 4-4-2 midfield is a social construct football?
Mate, I watch everything. You know what I mean? I watch anything and everywhere and any game. I had on the iPad on different sort of channels flicking around, but I missed the Spain games live, actually. That's the one thing I've not seen. So I'll be searching for that this afternoon.
Yeah, we'll touch on those. I think there's a few key points for Arsenal fans in particular. And I do have another guest with me today who has travelled across the world following Arsenal, trying delicately crafted sandwiches involving blocks of cheese, onion, and way too much butter. And his name is Tim Stillman. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
I mean, obviously, the international break doesn't mean that football stops for everybody. And the women had a great result on Saturday, beating Liverpool 4-0. And they'll obviously look to take some momentum into their Champions League quarterfinal second leg against Real Madrid on Wednesday. Although, as we spoke about before recording, they did just beat Barcelona for the first time in their history, which is some good preparation for them, far from ideal preparation for Arsenal. But before we get into some Arsenal bits, some interlull bits, how was Saturday, and what are your feelings going into that game at the Emirates?
Yeah, Saturday was great prep, not just because they were back at the Emirates, which is where they're going to be on Wednesday night, but Liverpool, relatively similar kind of team to Real Madrid, very particularly a Real Madrid team with a 2-goal lead. It's going to be a very, very similar challenge. And I think playing on like a proper football pitch with, a big crowd behind them. I think there's close to 20,000 sold at the moment for Wednesday night, hoping that comes up a bit as well in the next couple of days. Arsenal just tweak some things, and I think basically they set the template for Wednesday night. Big fast start as well, lots of high pressing. I think we're going to see that on Wednesday. So, yeah, absolutely. Like the men's international breaks for me are usually very busy, because quite deliberately they schedule a lot of women's football in this time. So, and also for Arsenal, pretty much guaranteed Champions League football next season, with the way the results this weekend, not least beating Liverpool 4-0. So all good. Looking forward to Wednesday.
Yeah, I think it will be a good chance for people to go in and obviously watch a game. I think there are still tickets available. There were 35,000 more or less at the game on Saturday. Are we expecting kind of similar numbers for this this game against Real Madrid?
I think it will be slightly lower. The midweek games usually are, but I mean, the record Women's Champions League attendance for a midweek game is held by Arsenal, unsurprisingly, when they played Bayern Munich a couple of years ago. I think that was 21,000. I think we should tick over that. But that's a real blueprint as well, because they went into that game 1-0 down and they absolutely blew Bayern away, particularly in the first half. And I think they're really going to look to replicate that. So when I say midweek attendance, Women's Champions League, the semi-finals are played at the weekend, and obviously the finals played at the weekend as well. So, going up to quarter-final like Arsenal have, they're not as big as the WSL attendances just because of the midweek factor, but they blow the socks off absolutely anything anyone else gets in the Women's Champions League. So they should break that record again, but I think Arsenal have broken enough attendance records now, and it's time to get to another semi-final.
I mean, it's certainly nicely poised, I would say, and hopefully the difference between playing at the carpet and what was an absolute swamp in Madrid last week will be in Arsenal's favour. Obviously, the weather you can't always control, but there are some questions about how that game was allowed to happen and blah blah blah. Obviously, on the men's side, we've still got a week before Arsenal play Fulham on April the 1st. I think it's over a week actually, so it's difficult to look ahead with too much detail. But there have been and will continue to be some players involved for the countries over the break. So I guess we'll start there and move on to some bigger picture stuff later on. For me, there's only one place to start really, and that's with Myles Lewis-Skelly, who has been at the center of many discussions of late. But how can we not talk about him again when he made his England debut at Wembley against Albania last Friday and scored to become the youngest player ever to net on his England debut? I mean, it's just incredible. It's another set of milestones for a really special 18-year-old. And I just wanted to break down his last 6 months for some perspective. Since October the 22nd, he has made his Premier League debut. He's scored his first Premier League goal. He's made his Champions League debut. He's become an Arsenal regular in probably the most congested position. He's received his first England cap and he scored his first goal for England. And that's without all the other nonsense that he's had to deal with, which carried on again after he was caught smiling on his way into St. George's Park. So, Clive, I'll turn to you first. It's been a mad few months for Myles, but he just seems to take every opportunity that's presented with him so effortlessly, so easily. There have been whispers around the club that he's potentially being viewed as captain material. Arteta, Tuchel, and others have been very complimentary about his personality, his leadership qualities. What do we have here? There's a lot.
There is a lot. And can you imagine the background, how people are adjusting to his newfound fame? He could be the most famous 18-year-old footballer in the country right now, right, just at this moment in time. And that's not to be sort of sniffed at. That's like a major level of exposure. That means parts of your life needs to be looked at, everyone who you're in contact with, because the Daily Mail will be searching for you. That's just the way it goes, I'm afraid. And you don't have to wait that long. Back in the day, we used to build up our young sports stars to knock them down. We sort of skipped the build-up bit. We just started knocking this kid down immediately, and before he'd even played 10 Premier League games. That makes people a little bit concerned as to why, So we were fortunate enough, I was fortunate enough to see him in LA pre-season. I thought, he looks a nice player. And just moved on to the other issues in the team. Like, I wonder if Fabio Vieira can play on the right wing, and Ethan looks quite good. Interesting. Smith Rowe was about to leave. I wasn't thinking we'd be here a few months later, that this kid would do this. I mean, he's changed physically, he's changed mentally, and he's just exploding and bursting onto the scene, to take a quote from elsewhere. He really has burst onto the scene as an 18-year-old defender. And it is quite scary, actually, how things can move at pace when you've got a level of talent and mental maturity to align to that talent. I don't care, mate. We all watch football. The three of us, we've watched lots of games. We watched lots of players, male players, female players. We try to project their advancements and everything like that. And then something like this happens, and not one of us could even remotely think it was going to happen in August. That's what's so beautiful about the game of football. I always say it's what we don't know rather than what we do know that's most exciting.
Yeah, I mean, Tuchel was beaming about him before the game, after the game, praising his courage and character. There was a lovely quote, and it said, him in training, after I've got to know him, it explains why it's so normal to fall in love with him. And I think James Benge noted during the Albania game that within even the space of a few minutes, Myles had tucked in to form a back three. He had overlapped so that Rashford could drive inside on his right foot and then join the front five in an inside forward spot, which is obviously how he got his goal as well. So, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I feel like his mum has competition, because at this point I'm ready to laminate a picture and put it in my wallet. I'm just beaming with pride every time I see him. Tim, I mentioned that little extract from James Benge about him fulfilling a number of roles, suiting different game states. His upbringing in midfield definitely helps, but are we slowly developing a tactical cheat code here?
I think so, yeah. And I think this really points to the advantage of developing your own talent. as well, and the advantage. I mean, obviously you've got to find talent that big, which is not easy. But him and Ethan as well, they both played in different roles, right? We've asked Ethan to fill in for Odegaard. Now we're asking him to fill in for Saka. Those are two very big asks we've made of a 17-year-old. And, Myles Lewis-Skelly, to your point, it's not like there's a lack of competition at left back. There are a lot of players who could have been picked over him, even when Calafiori was injured. And I think it just really speaks to how malleable young players can be. Look, I think the bottom line here is, and in many, many ways, it feels like our squad's gotten smaller this season, because it literally has, because of injuries. But in these two young lads, we've made it two senior players bigger. And Arteta was even talking about how that's going to change what we need in the summer, like in terms of the forward line. Maybe we are only looking at one forward now. Maybe that means we can go to 100 million on one forward instead of looking at a couple of 50 million players. Or, there's just so much within that. In another world, obviously, I think we're going to sell Zinchenko and Tierney, and I think those might have been done last summer on a different timeline anyway. But we might have been looking at this and going, Calafiori, he's a bit injury prone. Do we need left back cover? Is Kivior acceptable left back cover? But he's eliminated that question. In fact, I think he's probably ahead of Calafiori in the pecking order. And just how easily all this has come to him has been amazing. And actually, of the two, I think Nwaneri was the one people had heard of the most, not least because he came on in that Brentford game a couple of years ago, whereas I feel like Lewis-Skelly was a name people knew, but it almost feels a bit like Iwobi-like, in that when Iwobi broke through, I remember he wasn't talked about a lot as a kind of a potential first-team player, and then all of a sudden, bang, it happened. And it feels like Lewis-Skelly has almost come up, not in Nwaneri's shadow, but, all the talk has been about another player. And actually, Lewis-Skelly is the one who is playing all the minutes, who's playing for England and all of that. And I think it just speaks his maturity. And I watched the first half of the England-Albania game. I must admit, once Lewis-Skelly had scored his goal, I kind of lost interest again, and only turned it on when I realised he was in the starting lineup. But I think what you could see very quickly was the England players giving him the ball. And he started quite near Declan Rice, and I'm sure Declan Rice was saying in training in the dressing room, don't worry about this guy, don't worry about giving him the ball. I do it all the time, it's absolutely fine. But you could see very quickly how much they were trusting him, and I think that says a lot as well. And even the goal he scores, for all the qualities we've seen, that was a very trad fullbacky type run, which we actually haven't asked him to do that much. It's been much more tucking in type thing, but actually that was a real overlapping fullback type run. And yeah, I think this guy's just got everything. I really do. And I know his mum for a little while had been doing these kind of, I don't know if courses is the right way to talk about it, but she'd been advising other players other parents with young players. I think she's going to get a lot more sign-ups now. I think she's going to have to hire some staff to deal with the demand, because I think the way these and actually, sorry, I'll round this off by saying a lot of questions were asked about Arteta as well and how he could handle young players. I have to admit, I found that really overwrought. I always thought that was, I need to look for a problem. I'm going to make a hypothetical issue that hasn't come up yet, and I'm going to say that Arteta can't do it. The way he's handled both of these players, I think is absolutely exceptional as well. And it's not a situation he's dealt with a lot in his managerial career either. So I kind of kudos to him, but mainly kudos to Lewis-Skelly, all the people around him, all the coaches, his family who contributed to that wonderful moment.
That was kind of, you've trodden onto my next question there, because I think with young players, we're always torn between managing them carefully while also acknowledging that if you're good enough and performing well, you should be old enough to play. And I don't think Myles playing this much was ever part of the plan, but football has a habit of opening doors for you. And sometimes it's about who can meet what's required. And I think looking at young players down the years for Arsenal, that similar situation has seen some of the best young players that we've known come through, all the way from Fabregas down to Lewis-Skelly and Nwaneri. Did you have any initial concerns with how much he'd been playing and what he was exposed to, or are you kind of generally quite happy with how he's been managed?
Sorry, was that for me or Clive?
Sorry, for Tim. Yeah.
Not yet. I don't think it's quite been enough, and I do think I wrote about this a little bit last week. Actually, like, I really do think we're moving to a kind of system, not a system, but I think we're moving to having 4 fullbacks for the first team, basically. And we've had so many injuries in both fullback positions. And I think we've probably come to a stage where we can't say that's a coincidence, particularly at left back. We ask our left back to be everywhere, and our left backs keep getting injured. So I think there is a need to share that out. I also think that might be just an overall learning from this season, separate from the fullback thing. Did we underestimate the expansion of the calendar? I think we probably did. So, having like 4 first team quality fullbacks is going to be really, really important. So I do think there is the scope there to do a lot of sharing, a lot of like 60-30, 30-60 type stuff. So like at the moment, I think he's slightly ahead of Calafiori in the pecking order, but I don't think that means that Calafiori is not going to play. And it's the same with White and Timber. I think they're both going to play plenty. So I think we've got the resources there to make it less of an issue. And I also think it just makes sense tactically to kind of swap your fullbacks out, particularly in the era of 5 subs. In the era of 3 subs, maybe not, but 5 subs definitely. And I think with Nwaneri, I think what we can maybe do there, until it comes to a point where he's so good he has to play all the time, is that we can help take some of the load off Saka with him, particularly while Saka comes back from this injury. So I'm not there yet, but I think it's something maybe in 2 or 3 years, maybe if Calafiori gets a big injury or something and Lewis-Skelly has to play a whole season, then maybe that's something we have to look at. But at the moment, I'm not concerned about that.
Yeah, I've been quite open about this season and how it's felt like such a slog at times, for me anyway, just with the stuff that's been happening out of our control, the injuries, the red cards, some of the fixture lists we've had have been awful. But just how lucky have we been to watch Lewis-Skelly and Ethan break through together? I mean, you're lucky to get an academy graduate of the right level once a decade. To have both coming through now after already a recent batch of Highlanders like Smith Rowe, Saka, obviously Eddie and Reece were there and thereabouts as well, is just unbelievable. And Clive, I'm going to pivot to you now. I think every fan loves it when an academy graduate comes through, but for some clubs, it feels like a real part of their identity. I look at Ajax, Barcelona, maybe Lyon and Benfica to an extent. Arsenal definitely feel like they're part of that bracket. Why is it so important for this trend to continue, to see young players given opportunities and to watch them thrive for Arsenal, as long as they're at the right level, of course?
I think Arsenal are a club of values, basically, and how they operate. We don't get everything right, obviously, but I think our football values are quite good and quite strong. And having academy players come through is part of those values. But, that's been a challenge, right? Football has changed, become a lot more global. And we're not asking people to get into the first team any longer. We're asking people to get into the first team and then play Champions League quarterfinals at the Bernabeu. And that's a whole new ball game. So that gap needs to be managed. I mean, it's hard enough for clubs to manage coming up from the Championship to the Premier League, and we're asking players to go straight past that, go straight past the under 21s and go straight into the first team. We just say, well, he should be playing. So and I do think it's a massive challenge for us to absorb what this actually means. I think Tim's point around Arteta taking credit, I think for these two, he can take the most credit. Because when he walked in, they were 12 years of age, wherever he was, and he's been around during their development as well, along with the academy coaches. I can remember distinctly when they moved Ethan to centre forward. I was thinking, what are you doing? Seriously, I remember when they moved Myles to left back, I thought, what are you doing? He's really good in midfield. I want to win these youth games. You get a bit like that, and you forget that it's about development. I can remember, even playing off the left, I'm thinking, this is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, right now, we need a little bit of a midfield rebuild, right? So think it through a second. if we buy, we're going to lose a couple of experienced players in the summer. It looks like in Jorginho and Partey. Now, for me, I'm only buying one. I'm only buying one because there are players that can go into midfield right now from either Ethan or even Myles. And I'm going to give you a third name in Calafiori as well that could easily go into midfield and play. And I think we should be open to that. So rather than buy just to take away pathways, we say, no, we need something here at the back of the team to play mate from deep. But everything else we've already got. We just need to develop into those roles, right? So, and then let's save our brass for the forward parts of the pitch. We need pure evolution. And we're allowed to have these conversations because we know that Ethan can play left 8, right 8, no problem, right? We know Myles can play deeper and probably play left 8, right 8 as well, and fullback. Calafiori is staring at a left 8, saying, put me there, I'll take care of it. Merino can play left 8, right 8. So why are we buying two midfielders? You see, why would you do that? You would leave room, you'd leave minutes for that. I think that's really key. So I think it's if you think about our Arsenal watching world's mental health this season, right? So think about the things that are going to make you feel positive. And these two kids are probably top of the list, aren't they? Given all the things that went wrong, things in our control, out of our control, our ambition off the pitch, the way we've been perceived off the pitch, where we're looked at by everyone else as a failure because we haven't quite taken the opportunity that Man City supposedly gave us. And you think about what everyone would agree has been a positive. It's been the introduction of these two young players, and thank goodness for them. And when they both get signed up, I do think that'll be a day we'll all remember. And I wonder what their careers are going to be like and where it's going to end and what things are going to win. This is beyond exciting in my opinion.
Definitely. They have been the highlight of my season, to be honest. That game against Man City was the highlight of my season, just seeing how both of them came on. Obviously, Lewis-Skelly started the game. Nwaneri came on and scored that brilliant goal. I think they've saved us a lot of money, as you alluded to earlier, and just huge kudos to Arteta, to Hale End, to both of them individually, because we're so lucky to have them and see them playing at this level so regularly. So yeah, just moving on to another left back. You mentioned him before, Clive. We've got some concerns again over Riccardo Calafiori, who was injured while playing for Italy. And while there's been nothing official from the Arsenal side, there has been some reporting from Italy that it could be another 2 to 3 weeks out with a grade 1 knee ligament injury. Obviously, we don't know the exact details yet, but that's just been reported in Italy. I think the incident itself was very similar to the one he suffered against PSG earlier this season, where he slipped after his knee buckled, pulling some of his body weight one way, some of it went another way. And let's be honest, nobody should be moving like that, really. And I'm quite lucky, and we're quite lucky that it's not more serious. I'm reluctant to play armchair specialist because I think some people jump into that very quickly. And suddenly we've got, kinesiology specialists posting threads about why his back feet are never planted correctly and how his hips need to be strengthened to support more locomotion. But I don't think you need to be an expert to find a link between his injury history, which involved a potentially career-ending knee reconstruction, and his overall body mechanics, which can look awkward at times purely because he's big, he's powerful. And someone that size needs to be at tip-top shape to kind of sprint and change directions several times per game. Obviously, Clive, you've watched players at all levels. You've coached as well. Do you think there is something more to these incidents than just bad luck? Someone slipping on a wet surface, or do we really need to look at how he's moving, how his body is looking? Obviously, we can only know so much, but obviously your opinion might be a little bit more detailed.
Yeah, bad luck or good luck. If you think about how Tomiyasu done his knee against Sporting Lisbon those years ago, it's quite similar, wasn't it? And we've yet to see him really recover from those injuries. So whether we misdiagnose, who knows, right? So I think it potentially could be good luck. I think when he goes down sometimes, he's still got a bit of the shock in him from his original injury. He goes down, he goes straight to that leg. And if you've ever seen the video, I don't want to encourage people to look at it because it's that bad. You would have some some stress is there, would you? But if you have that injury, every time you tweak that knee, you think the worst is going to happen. So there's a little bit of mental scar tissue there, literally, for him. Personally, I remember the first time I saw him as a pre-season friendly at the Emirates. He came onto the pitch and I thought he was an IKEA wardrobe running on. Right? So, and he looked so square and he looked like he needed to get fit. Again, we bought players post to Euros in Merino and Calafiori, and they both look like they need to get fit. And I think both of them, well, particularly Calafiori, did a proper pre-season with no competitions in the summer to get them back to shape. If anything, if I just flip to Merino slightly, he looks fit now, and he looks really strong. And having to do all those sprints as a centre forward wasn't in his that wasn't his requirement when he signed, but he now looks fit. And I think Calafiori just needs time to get fit. And I do think the way he plays football is so instinctive and it's so creative. It's so like, it's there, I see it, I go get it, and I go get it again. And I follow the pass, and I do everything quick and front-footed. Those sort of players need to be confident in their body so they can go. And I think he's getting there. Every time he gets there, he trips over a stone and scrapes his knee. Do you know what I mean? And slows down again. I'm thinking, mate, just keep in the building, keep doing your thing. Don't push too hard. Make sure you end the season injury-free and then really work, and come back in shape. So I do think that's where he needs to get to for him in the summer.
It's obviously too early to make definitive judgments on players without a full season under their belts. But I have found the discourse around Calafiori quite interesting at times because fans really wrestle with what they think a defender should be in their minds while balancing the trade-off of what he offers us further forward. And Tim, it's been a common criticism that players lack individuality under Mikel Arteta, but Calafiori feels like someone who is willing to break the mold, someone who likes taking individual responsibility. And Arteta was the one who pushed for him when others at the club were maybe a bit more reluctant. What have you made of him so far generally, his impact? And are you a little bit concerned about the injuries, or is this just something he's going to have to get over?
Yeah, I think, and again, I wrote about this about a month ago, like, it's weird for all the talk of structure and everything like that. Like, the Arteta's taste in left-backs tends to be like this, right? Who's he trusted there? He's played Saka there, actually played Xhaka there for a little bit, Zinchenko, and now Calafiori. Like, these are players he's brought in. He decided to make Myles Lewis-Skelly from midfield to a left-back. Like, there's something about the position. And you can say the same with Guardiola as well, right? Like, he had Joao Cancelo there, now he's got Guardiola there. There's something about that position that they think that needs a little bit of chaos, and perhaps it's just something to do with the freedom you get on the ball when you're a fullback, or the freedom you get to make runs. Even Tomiyasu is not by any stretch of the imagination like your archetypal left back. The only archetypal left back he's ever had is Kieran Tierney, and I don't think he's ever really wanted him. Like, there's something about that position where Arteta wants them all over the map. So I'm actually not that surprised with that in the Calafiori signing. Same as Clive, when he came on in his first Emirates Cup game, I swapped sides of the stadium and I was kind of behind the dugout for, I think, the Lyon game, which was great because I was behind Nicolas Jova and we scored from 2 corners. So that was that was a great, he was probably our star player on the day, actually. But Calafiori came on in the second half and he was down my side. I mean, he looked like he was wearing shoulder pads to me. He looks like an NFL player, like he's got the shoulder pads on under his shirt. Like, he's very, very kind of broad guy. And his mechanics are slightly strange. Like, he's a stocky guy, like, he does get some speed up, but it takes him like a few steps. Listen, I'm not any sort of expert, and I think you're right. We do get a bit overwrought over these things because he's had 2 similar incidents now where he slipped. Maybe that's his body mechanics, but maybe that's also just a symptom of what we ask him to do. And maybe that is part of why our left backs tend to get injured quite a lot, because we ask them to go everywhere, lots of twisting and turning. You look at both those injuries, this one in the Italy game, where it looks like he's more at left centre back and he kind of like turning his body off the ball, which is very similar to how he does it against PSG, where he turns his body inwards to receive. And maybe if he was your common garden left back, receiving Kieran Tierney style on the instep forward you go, like lots of straight lines, then perhaps he'd just have hamstring injuries like Kieran Tierney did, running in lots of straight lines and doing lots of sprinting. So maybe it's something to do with the kind of the twisting and the turning and all of that. But I mean, I think we've got a real player there, though. He just this comparison is not going to do him the justice I think he quite deserves. But I always had this thing about Thomas Vermaelen where I was like, he's a really good player, but I can't think of a position on the pitch I'd play him in. I kind of always thought of Thomas Vermaelen. I don't think he's a centre-back. I don't think he's a left-back. Don't think he's a midfielder, but I do think he's a really good footballer. So I don't know. I think now Thomas Vermaelen would be a left-back, definitely. He'd be your inverting left-back or you slide across to make a back three. Like Thomas Vermaelen would be much better, I think, I say in this day and age, like compared to 15 years ago. And it is kind of similar with Calafiori because I'm not tied to the idea that defenders are just guys that defend the box. And I think there are a lot of mischaracterizations about Arsenal because we're considered defensively solid. The commentary seems to somehow have become that we stick 10 guys on the goal line every game when we absolutely do not. Like Saliba and Gabriel are on the halfway line. The reason we're good defensively is probably because we don't take a lot of risks with the ball and we don't lose it and we dominate teams. But so I'm not really massively tied to the idea that, like, you know, our fullback should be short back and sides type thing. Like Calafiori, he does look like he could be in the strokes, you know. But I do. There is something there where I am a bit curious about whether he could play another position or whether he's another player. Because Italy kind of play him left centre back in a back three, don't they? They did, I think, in the Euros, and I can definitely see that where like you've got your almost like the way David Luiz used to be used, like in a back three. Okay, he's going to go all over the map, so we're going to put two centre backs behind him to let him, type thing. And you know, I am a bit curious as to whether left back is the best space for him. It might be, but I think there's so much about when you've got someone who's going all over the map, you need other guys who are quite dependable, and that could still be Declan Rice. It could be, you know, Declan Rice is your guy that covers that area. So I'm really, really curious to see how it unfolds with Calafiori. I do think we have a real player there. I'm not 100,000% that we've got a left back there, but I think it would be really interesting. Obviously, the injuries are a worry. Obviously, they are. Like, it would be a complete lie to say they're not. At the same time, I think it's far too early to go over the top on that. That is just something we're going to have to keep an eye on, I think.
It is funny to hear you both reference his size and his broad shoulders, because when he came through at Roma, he was such a string bean. He was so tall and skinny and lanky. But again, it shows you that development is not always linear. Sometimes it happens later. Sometimes it happens earlier in players. He was a really technical kind of overlapping fullback for Roma, and now you see this powerhouse who can do everything. I'll stick with you, Tim, actually, because you've spoken about it. Where do you see him ending up positionally? Because I wrote about Calafiori when he first signed, and I said on paper he was a left centre back in a back three. But if you watch the tape, he was given license to go by Thiago Motta to go and do whatever he wanted. That's why you saw him dinking the goalkeeper, against Juventus. That's why you saw him popping up on the right wing. I'm really reluctant to say, can we afford him that level of freedom? It's more, do we want him doing that? Or is this just kind of, you've just joined, we need you at left back for now, and we'll figure everything out later?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that going on. I think there is a bit of left backs where we've got a spot and you can play there, type thing. But like, we haven't nailed the left 8 position, have we? Really? Like that's still, you know, nearly 2 years after Jacques has left. I mean, Declan Rice is the one who's nailed that the most, really. So that, you know, could he play there? But then that left 8 position, I guess the interrelation between left 8 and left back is quite interesting, because actually the left 8 position under Arteta is quite a disciplined one, is one that isn't all over the map, and is one that's a bit more straight-liney. So maybe left back is the position for him in that respect. Or maybe, you know, you have a more traditional type left back, and then you put someone like maybe even Lewis-Skelly even or Calafiori with that real like running, gliding power on the ball, which we haven't really had. The left eight has always been, it's Xhaka, Havertz, Merino, like big guy, good in the duels, good at pressing and all of that. Maybe we could flip that, and maybe we could have a bit more of a maverick presence there. I'm not sure. But what was really interesting was what really jumped out at me when he scored that goal at PSV, where he pops up in the right channel up front, is Arteta mentioned that in the post-match. He said, Ricky made a run as a number 9. And he said, and that's the team I want us to be. And I thought that was really interesting, because I think there is a little bit more flex and a little bit more freedom that Arteta probably wants in his team, but I'm just not sure in attack he's had the total talent for it. Yeah. And, you try and track his ideas. Jesus was the number 9 he bought, right? And Jesus is your all over the map, over on the left, over on the right, like absolutely everywhere, dropping into midfield, like that was his chaos player, really, and that no longer seems to be the case. Seems to move much more towards more of a focal point of a striker, and so that perhaps leaves that opportunity somewhere else. But I guess I don't see another position other than left 8. Like I don't think you can have your wingers playing like that. I don't know. Maybe you can be a striker and just buzz around everywhere, but I think it probably is about that interrelation between left 8 and left back, and where the chaos comes from.
Clive, I'll put the same question to you. In your mind, what is the plan for Calafiori, and where do we play him for maximum benefit?
I think we spoke about 2 players on the main, and Myles and him have something that are quite similar. They can receive the ball all different ways round, facing the touchline, facing inside, playing on the outside, playing high, playing wide. And when they receive it, they look natural in those positions. So really, think of positions as just where you start from. It's where you end up and the value you can offer in those places that's really important. Myles' life has changed. It changed because he made a out to in run and ended up in the penalty area. So what didn't really matter what position he is for that. He could be a midfield, or he could be a left back or a left winger. He made the run because the team required it, because they'd rotated out of that space. He rotated into it and made an out to in run, and then scored a goal, which is going to basically make him a few quid in his life, right? So that's what Calafiori has. When he scored that goal, what position was he playing? But you end up on the right-hand side. So your starting position is just part of your framework where you flip to off the ball. On the ball, have you got the ability to add value in different zones of the pitch? We've all seen the pitch marked out in certain zones. We all know what we play a positional football, but we want to create relationships within that positional play. And these 2 are ideal at it. They're absolutely ideal. And this comes back to coaching. You heard sort of Declan Rice speak about Tuchel and what's it been like in training. He says it's very similar to the club game. That basically means they play a positional style of football with structure, but you work in and out of your structure when the moment arrives. You've got to take that moment and have a sense of personal accountability. So when you guys were talking about positions, I tested my head down here thinking, don't snap it, because positions, they are important, but they're not really in the construct of on-the-ball play. It's what you do in those spaces. So, mate, when I play football, I play centre mid. You step down left wing, you might as well have sat me down in the crowd. Absolutely useless for everybody. Wouldn't know what to do, didn't have the angles, nothing. Had to be in the centre circle next to the ref. Then I was okay. They don't develop players like me anymore. They develop people who can do lots of stuff, right? So we wouldn't have it. We wouldn't have it any longer. So, yeah, to watch these 2 develop, I'm not going to pin them anywhere. You don't. Why should you? Sometimes when Myles starts left back, I think, this is the Calafiori game. You know what? In 5 subs, we can do it at half time, and the world doesn't change. Who cares, right? So, and sometimes I think, if Calafiori is getting roasted by somebody, I think this is a Myles game. Just lock that down, and that's what he's done. So I think we're just very fortunate to have these type of players and this level of coach, which is at the top level when it comes to coaching and developing people, and we're just learning about that now.
It reminds me a bit of the first 11 talk. What's our first 11? What's our strongest 11? And I think at this
Are
point,
you just trying to wind me up? Are you? Or,
that's my job. I'm winding you up and I'm letting you go, Clive. Yeah, that feels to me quite redundant now, because I think we've seen with Arteta, as long as everyone's available, he is willing to change stuff, put people in different positions and places. Even now with Merino, I mean, this is far from ideal for everybody, but he's playing there and doing well. So, yeah, it is just a fun idea and sort of game to project things on people. And I think absolutely with Calafiori, we don't really know what we've got yet, because he could be anything. So I think at some point we'll open Pandora's box and we'll find out. So yeah, that's kind of it for part one. I have been instructed to take a quick break so Elliot can sort out some ad reads. So I'll leave you with those and we'll be back with more in part two. So see you then. Welcome back to part two of the show, and I wanted to talk Mikel Merino because he was involved in two corkers between Spain and the Netherlands. Clive, you should absolutely go and watch them again, making good contributions in both matches. Spain, obviously, if you don't know already, they came out as winners on penalties with the aggregate score at 5-5 over both legs. And if you haven't seen the goal Lamine Yamal scored last night, please go and watch it, because that boy is special. 17 years old. He's younger than Ethan. I mean, he's embarrassingly good. But back to Merino, his mission to become the world's best number 9 continued after his injury time equaliser in Feyenoord last Friday. A real poacher's finish, actually. Ran off the back of Virgil van Dijk. He's absolutely rattled ahead of our visit to Anfield in May, before scoring a penalty in last night's shootout after coming on as a substitute. Clive, you've been quite vocal in your support of Mikel Merino, who is doing a huge job for the team, while others haven't been so impressed, not naming any names, because his pace and his technique have maybe been a little bit exposed in England. But there's no doubt that he's doing an incredible job for the team right now as the centre forward. How important is he going to be between now and the end of the season?
I think I said a little while ago, I think he's a hero. Honestly, I think he is, because he has saved us from a really despairing few weeks. I think when we lost Kai Havertz, I thought it was a major moment for us, as many of us did. And because I think he does so many things that we just take for granted. I mean, when he went down, he covered the third most kilometres in the whole of the Premier League. Right, the other two were centre mids. That tells you what he was doing for us, and it obviously cost us in the end, right? So, and we're not going to replicate him. We're not going to replicate Jesus. So, what next? We're a team that likes to go over the press on occasions, and so we needed somebody slightly bigger, and he was the guy we chose. But what surprised me is his movement, and that goal at the week and last week against Holland. Sorry, the movement was that's centre forward movement. That's predicting what's going to happen, right? And so the goal against Leicester, the headed goal was lovely. The second goal was lovely. He missed a shot against Manchester United, which is a bit of a blow. But again, he scores at the weekend with a set piece goal. And I'm thinking myself against Chelsea, and I'm thinking, okay, we listen to Champions League music. And there's one tune I never want to hear again at Arsenal, and that's the Europa League tune. I never want to hear it again. I just honestly, too many years. Tim knows what I'm talking about.
Absolute banger, Clive. Come on.
Too many years pretending it was important. It wasn't important. It's crap. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear it. So what's going to stop us getting there? And I'm looking at this bloke who's a centre mid, and I'm looking at him running around versus Chelsea in particular. I'm thinking, you're really trying hard here. You're trying hard for your team. You're trying to help all your teammates out. You're getting close to collisions. You're making sure you're there for duels when you need to be. Then you're posting up. You're pressing. You're doing things that are completely what I saw him try to do at Bournemouth. Remember Bournemouth? He played in the Odegaard role. I'm thinking, what are you doing? This is not working. Here I am watching the Chelsea game, thinking, mate, you're moving quite well now. You're getting fitter. You're getting stronger. For me, he's stopping that Europa League music coming back to Arsenal Football Club, right? And that's because we haven't done our job to make sure we had enough forwards in our club, right? So maybe it's very unlucky with injuries, and they're coming back now, and that's why he's a hero to me. And if he keeps doing this, I'll be really, really pleased with him. And I just love his attitude, his team play, and he's doing things which we know are not his normal game. and he's doing that for his teammates and for his manager. And so, for me, they're the hero players, the ones that are doing things above and beyond their expectations.
Tim, you haven't loved the striker experiment so much, despite obviously recognizing why it's happening or needed to happen.
I don't have a better suggestion.
Yeah, none of us do. Would you be tempted to go Trossard false nine, Martinelli and Saka either side when he comes back? Or is this just who we are as a team now, in that we need a big man to play off?
I think that is who we are as a team now. I think that the efforts for Sesko, for example, in the summer kind of tell you that. The fact that we've fallen on Merino here. I mean, Trossard was the first thing we tried. It lasted 68 minutes and we literally haven't seen it again. So
you were there, Tim, weren't you?
Yeah.
Game? How did you feel watching it?
Yeah, not great, to be honest. And I think, to be honest, I do think that there are some good signs with Merino. I think there are games where it's been lost, like West Ham, just totally lost. Forest, it looked a bit better, but still quite lost. I still don't think it looks amazing, but I also don't expect it to. However, I fully expect Merino to stay up front for the whole season. I think that's going to remain. And I think what we will do, and actually, I mean, I don't really want to judge him in that position anyway, to be honest. I'm fine with saying thank you for doing the job you're doing, but if you wanted to judge him as a centre forward, I think when Saka and Martinelli back is a much better time to do it. Let's face it, when Saka's back, right? When our main attacker is back, I think it's really interesting actually at the moment that, like, who's Liverpool's number 9? Like,
Jota
sometimes.
Diaz sometimes.
He's run hot and cold. Diaz, hot and cold. Nunez, cold. And so, like, it's with a little.
Are we
bit...
heading towards the importance of centre forwards in modern football conversation? Because I'm ready.
it's more that no one cares who Liverpool's centre forward is because Salah scores all their goals, and they haven't replaced Mane and they haven't replaced Firmino, but they've got Salah, and like Saka is the closest thing we have to Salah, right? Like, even when Havertz is fit, even when Jesus is fit, he's the main guy. So I'd be much more inclined to judge Merino's work up front once Saka comes back, once we get like that lighthouse back up there, that guy who really can just make things happen on his own. Saka, when Ødegaard was out, that didn't seem to be such a huge problem for him because he's that good. Much like Salah, lost Firmino, lost Mane, doesn't matter. Like, lost Thiago, like Henderson, like lost them all, doesn't matter because he can still do it. So I really do think we're going to see Merino up front for the rest of the season, though. I don't see us, unless there's like a bit of rotation, or God forbid Merino himself gets injured. That's potentially a Freudian slip on my part. Unless he gets injured, like, I think Arteta's made it very clear he's going to stick with this now, and there's a value in that because I think whatever we do, we're going to have an unfamiliar striker, and that being the case, we probably should stick with the same guy and let him get used to it. And actually, I've kind of advocated for, well, let's play Merino, but let's play him off Trossard or something like that. But actually, I think that at this stage probably risks muddying the water, and we want Merino in that centre forward zone for the rest of the season. I don't imagine we'll see it again after this season, I have to be honest, but I think there's a value to keeping him there. I think Arteta's clearly made his mind up that we need that physical presence, and perhaps we'll see a bit more once Saka comes back.
Yeah, there was a great interview with him in The Guardian this week, speaking to Sid Lowe about what it's been like playing as a centre forward, how he's adapted to the position, what he thinks of the Real Madrid tie, and how he was told about potentially playing as the centre forward during the morning walk before the Leicester game. So that shows you how kind of thrown on him it was, and that this wasn't really in the thinking, despite it going around on social media a bit, the Fellaini comparisons. But I thought he came across really well in his initial interview with the club when he's going around with Edu in the back of the Sprinter. He's got his shirt with his family there, and you can just see that there's a real maturity and curiosity to how he views football. Clive, you've called him the bank manager before. Do you think that's part of his appeal and why Arteta wanted him at the club? A level of experience, maturity, clarity in what he brings? Obviously, the duels and the aerial wins aside, is that part of his USP as well, being a real sort of mature figure behind the scenes?
Yeah, the reason why I called him that, I just think he's sensible. He does sensible stuff. I mean, even the chance, I think it was going to Chelsea. Remember the back post? I think Martinelli clipped to the back post and he got the volley off. And if you look at that volley, he didn't like slash at it. He's like, open the foot out, big side foot, hit target hard. That's sensible stuff, right? You know, you're making the keeper work. You're doing the
It's a great
sensible
save,
thing.
actually.
It's a great save, just about kept it out. And I'm thinking, I looked it back, I thought, you know what? You're a sensible guy. And what are we losing in the summer? We're losing Jorginho, the other sensible guy in the group that really is a coach stroke leader. I think he's a massive support to Arteta. And I think Merino will grow into that sort of uncle type player. His interviews are well spotted, Phil. They're tremendous. Listen to him talk in his second language. How he can do it. How he can hold a crowd. He adds humour in. I mean, he has got something. He's grown on me. I used to look at him and say, okay, you represent to me, young man, the lack of evolution of our attacking play. Could we have done something else? And I looked at him and thought, is that enough? But a squad is made up of different types of people, different types of players. When you're spending all your time together, you're traveling away together, you need people who are there for you in adversity. You need people who are always there. And that's what he's like. And he's just a sensible dude, a bank manager you go and get your form signed from, and you go and ask him for something. And it stuck with me. And I think he's growing into it even more, So I just think I want the flashy signings. I want the Elise to come to Arsenal. I wanted that when he was available. I'm looking at other players now. They're all tricksters and carriers and movers and slashing shots on the edge of the area. I'm looking at these players. I want them to, but you need some glue people. We look at Chelsea, for example. They've got 1.2 billion they spent. They've got no glue in that team. Nothing that binds them together. And so a team does need different characters. So my mind is open. If anything, I'm more disappointed in him as a midfielder than as a centre forward. But my mind is open. Yeah. And I think once he gets his pre-season in, let's see what he looks like next season.
Just before we start wrapping up, I want to discuss Bukayo Saka, because after what's felt like an age, he's getting closer to returning, and for a very important part of the season as well. I feel a bit like Michael Scott in The Office, running around telling everybody to stay calm, even though in my mind he's coming back to save our season, and just, my life generally, because life is better with Bukayo Saka in it. Tim, we've got two quite tricky games actually before playing Real Madrid on April the 8th, Fulham at home and then Everton away. Do you expect him to feature in either of those? Could he even start either of those? And what minute will he be scoring the first against Real Madrid?
First minute, because he'll start. I suspect we will see him in the squad, maybe for Ipswich. I've just no information, obviously. I've just got a little feeling that maybe he could have made that Chelsea squad, but maybe there was a bit of back off Mr. Tuchel type stuff going on, the bit of like, no, you're not going anywhere for the international break. We'll get through this game without you type thing. So, and it's been so quiet, actually, and I kind of think that that's got to have been deliberate, because usually, yeah, there'd be he's back on the grass, and you'd get like an access all areas of him putting his boots on, and
I think Arteta's going through every image on Getty and just saying no. Yeah.
I think if you zoom in, there's a shin pad on the floor with B on it. Can we get rid of that, please, Mr. Price? So yeah, I think that's got to have been a bit deliberate, because in the ordinary run of things, I'm sure the content team want to do a documentary on like the first time he straightened his leg type thing. But this, I really, really think, and maybe that suspicion is informed as well by Arteta, not a guy given to joking very much, particularly with the media, but that very I never realised how much he looked like Charlie Chaplin actually until he did that whole, when he was asked by the interviewer about Saka and he pretends to run off and then comes back. Yeah. Was very like Chaplin like timing. I mean, that to me kind of says, yeah, he's going to be back, and I'm sure that they've had like a pin in the calendar on the Real Madrid game, and I definitely don't think he'll start against Fulham. Maybe sneaks into the squad. I do think against Everton, maybe we'll see him in that squad, and I think the way they'd probably like to do it is to be able to start him in both legs against Real Madrid and maybe sit him on the bench for the Brentford game in between, particularly if we can get some good results against Fulham and Everton. If we take like 4 points from those two, I think we can park him on the bench for Brentford, save him for those 2 Real Madrid games. I'm certain that that's been the big old red ring on the calendar. So I am expecting to see him in the squad, if not for Fulham, definitely for Everton. All of this is gut feel. Obviously, I would be astounded if he wasn't involved in the first Real Madrid game, and I'm pretty certain that they'll want him to start that. And Nwaneri now, I think we probably got to a situation where it's like, okay, Nwaneri can play the last like 20 minutes of a home tie against Real Madrid if we need him to. I think we can trust him for that, and he's probably been a bit overexposed physically this season, but the advantage is we definitely know there's no problems about him playing some part in that game. So I think they can game share. I think that's what will happen.
Clive, on a wider level, what does Saka being back offer this team, both on a tactical and mental level? Because I think Tim alluded to it before. Liverpool are obviously a very good team, but their points tally has just been propelled by Mohamed Salah having a superhuman season. And Bukayo Saka is our Mohamed Salah. So should we be wary about what to expect from him coming back from a hamstring injury, which involved surgery as well? It was a really bad one. Or should we be using his return as a boost, as something mentally we can say, look, he's back now, we're back, let's go and attack teams again?
I think we should be using his injury as a message to us, really, on our over-reliance on him. I mean, I used to sit on here and I used to say the words, he's the first one over the top in every single game I watch. Every single time the crowd get excited, it was him. And I was saying it, just enjoying it, as if he was going to be there forever, right? And so you get that feeling, do you, with players when they're doing so well, they're usually, well, just going to keep going. And then they stop. And I'd be so interested to see what lessons we've learned about our reliance on going to that right-hand side in particular to him, and he just fixes everything. I'd be really interested to see how we evolve our attack next year and what lessons we learn from that, particularly using our left winger slightly differently. And I think it's been a real shock to us all, really. And the numbers were there for us all to see, but we still ignored it, right? And so, yeah, as a person, as a player, he is the franchise, isn't he? He is it. That is it. And we're just, we've been talking about lucky to have these 3 young players coming through, and there's others in the background that we all know. We are incredibly fortunate because they represent us all really, really well. And yeah, I can't wait to see him back, really, because everything we do as a team is we build, and then we go to wide areas. We get criticised for not attacking down the centre of the pitch. Personally, I don't mind going into wide areas. It's what you do then. If you come off the sides, you attract people to you, go into those central zones from the sides, and we can do things then when at pace, when we arrive on the hoof, on the gallop, and then we go past people, third man runs in behind cutbacks. We just need to do it on both sides more consistently. And so as soon as we can do that, then the way we play will be perfect. So for me, really investing in how we play and really, really investing it and say, yeah, this is what we do. But we're going to make sure we've got more than one person who can do it really, really well. Particularly once the ball's in the last third. And that's Arsenal's development, really. So Bukayo Saka has taught us all something, that we need to get better at the overall attacking picture, particularly in the last third, and not be so reliant on somebody. I know he's special, but you just can't get there. Single points of failure are never good for you in anything you're doing, any organisation you're in. You've got to reinsure yourself. And so, yeah, I can't wait to see him back. And if there are rumours he's back for Fulham, which I think he will be, by the way, Tim. That's my gut feel.
Exclusive.
I'll tell you why. I'll give you a little scoop, right? And some people have already seen it. there was one picture that didn't get vetted. It was from Zinchenko in training a little while ago, and Bukayo Saka's leg was in the background, and so he's definitely been on the grass. He's definitely been around the players, and that was about 3-4 weeks ago. So I'm fully expecting him to be playing against Fulham or be in the squad. That's going to boost ticket sales, be in the squad, and I can't wait to be there.
That's Zinchenko dropped now for the rest of the season. You've seen why he's not playing any minutes now, because he's too busy leaking images. Fulham is an interesting one because it feels far away, but it's also the next game we have. So I think after a few weeks in training and, another few days under his belt, another day's taking shots at whoever's in goal at training, Tommy Setford or whoever. I think of that Real Madrid game at home. I'm rubbing my hands together because the scene is set. And if you can think of anyone kind of stepping up and making a difference, it's him. So I just think it will be so poetic to have him back.
Can I just caveat that excitement a little bit? We're just watching Ben White get back to fitness, aren't we?
I know. You can hear him moving.
And he is like the supreme athlete, absolutely incredible. And he's finding it a challenge after 4 or 5 months, however it's been. So even though in my mind I've got him sticking it top corner at the Bernabeu, it may not be so smooth.
That's kind of it for now. Obviously, again, there'll be some stuff closer to Fulham. Maybe this is too early. We're still a week or so away. But just rounding up on some of our other players quickly. Gabriel flew back to London early after getting booked for Brazil in the 2-1 win over Colombia, with Vinicius Jr. scoring a 99th minute winner in that one. So that's good. He didn't have to stick around, and he's come back early to hopefully be ready for Fulham. Jurrien Timber was called up by the Netherlands, but didn't play either game due to illness. Although I think it was being reported in the Evening Standard that he'll be fine for the Fulham game as well. And maybe him getting a rest isn't the worst thing. So by all means, play Jeremy Frimpong. We'll be fine with Timber getting a bit of a rest. Saliba as well, played twice for France against Croatia. Had a bit of a stinker in the first game alongside Konate. They lost 2-0, but he was better alongside Upamecano in last night's 2-0 win, and then they eventually went on to win on penalties. Ethan Ranieri made his England under-21 debut in the 5-3 defeat against France. He could play tonight as well, as we record on Monday. A certain Hugo Ekitike scored a hat-trick in that one. Ryan Shirky ran the show as well. I mean, there was just so much talent on that pitch. Any of you guys want to add anything else before we kind of look to wrap up here?
Yeah, on Ekitike. I shouldn't. Why did I even know that?
It's difficult. There's too many T's and K's in that name.
On Hugo, right? I think he's one to have a look at, isn't he? He's quite a bendy forward. He's very light. In my mind, he is the sort of player that we should be looking at. I think that number's getting a bit high, Phil. It's around the 80. I'm not sure if it's quite that, but the numbers are getting high. But it's the sort of player that I would instantly go, yeah, that's us, immediately. But then I think back to who we are now and where we play, and we need some penalty area dominance. And my eyes still go towards Sesko, to be honest. But that's just me doing my squad building, as I do when I'm walking the dogs. and I wonder what we're going to do. But it's going to be interesting, isn't it? See, we end up with, because even the rumours of Gyökeres also been touted around a little bit. And I have seen him live, and he's an impressive player. All right, again, it's about the numbers. So I can't wait to see what we land on.
Yeah, it's the kind of the same old names featuring, isn't it? Ekitike is coming into the fore a bit now because Marmoush was hogging the limelight, so that kind of gives him a chance to come forward. Šeško's always been there. We've done the work on him. Gyökeres as well. I think we've done the work on him. He was being linked to Forest as well at some point this week. So
that's a smart move, that Forest game.
Look, if they want to go big, they wanted to go big on Cunha in January, so maybe they've got money ready to burn.
The way they play on the counter attack. He is perfect, isn't he, for them? Very concerning.
Yeah, sounds like it. There was a couple of a few other bits. Trossard was playing for Belgium, but nothing hugely interesting. Obviously, England play again tonight. We could see Myles again tonight. Tim, would you prefer him to be on the bench for this one? Just avoid any risk of injury, someone clattering into him from a Latvia perspective?
Probably yes, particularly in light of the Calafiori thing. But at the same time, I'm kind of rooting for him to go and play there again and almost, I say, make that position his. Like, England aren't blessed with left backs at the moment, which is why he's got his chance at the moment. Few injuries around as well. So I kind of, the avuncular side of me wants him to play and go and score again and really be talked about as England's new left back. But I think the Arsenal fan in me is probably thinking maybe 20 minutes at the end so he gets his second cap and stays nice and sharp. But, we got some games coming up and we're only down to, I think, 4 left backs now. And, it's getting a bit scary. So definitely a little bit of cotton wool there for me.
I think that's basically everything we could have covered today. I mean, news has been light. Obviously, the players have been playing, but from an Arsenal perspective, there hasn't been a huge amount of news. As I said before, I know we've still got some time between now and the Fulham game, but I'm pretty sure there'll be some content lined up between now and then. I'm hearing rumours of an Ekitike and Nippon scouting video, maybe even an unmarked episode as well, some stats guy and a civilian. So there'll be plenty for you guys to get into on the Patreon side. And of course, there'll be some information about the upcoming annual April fundraiser, which always blows me away. I mean, the community coming together, the amount of generosity people show is always incredible. So keep your eyes and your ears out and open and ready to listen. Other than that, all I can say is, Clive, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much.
Tim, lovely to catch up as always.
My pleasure as always.
And my name is Phil Costa, and thanks for putting up with me for this episode. I know people get onto Elliot sometimes, but hosting is hard. So hopefully this change of pace hasn't been too distracting. And I'm sure we'll talk to you before Arsenal 10, Fulham 0.